Voy a hablar en francés, así que puede activar la traducción. Euh, voilà, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Donc,
So,
bienvenue à ce
hello to
webinaire
all
sur la
of you.
transition
Welcome
juste et
to
la
this
protection
webinar
sociale.
dedicated
Donc, je
to
suis
just
Aurélie
transition
de
and social
WSM
protection. My name
et je
is
suis ravie
Aurélie. I
de
come
vous
from
accueillir aujourd'hui
WSM. I'm
à
very
ce
pleased to
troisième
welcome
webinaire
you
donc, sur la
today
transition juste,
to this
organisé par la
third
plateforme de
webinar on
coordination de
just
travail
transition,
décent,
which has
donc,
been
qui regroupe
organized
différentes
by
organisations
the
belges,
platform
donc
on
principalement des
decent
syndicats, dont
work.
la
It
CPDW, la
regroups
FGTB et la
Belgian
CESN, des mutuelles de
organizations,
santé,
mainly
l'ANSP et
trade
Solidaris,
unions,
et alors des ONG comme
health
FOSS, Solsoc,
mutuals,
Oxfam et
and
donc WFM.
also
Voilà, ensemble, cette
NGOs
plateforme a
like False
l'objectif
False Fan
de vraiment
and
renforcer
WSM. The
leur impact
aim
et leur
of the
synergie
platform
avec un
is
plaidoyer
to
commun et surtout un
reinforce
processus
our
d'apprentissage. Donc,
impact
c'est pour ça
with
qu'on
a
vous
common
remercie aussi
plea and
d'être
a
présents
learning
aujourd'hui.
process. And we want to
Cette
all
plateforme donc
thank you
s'inscrit
for
aussi
being
dans
here
le cadre
today.
d'une
This
coopération
platform
internationale.
is also
Donc, cette série de
the
webinaires
result of
provient
an
voilà, de
international
renforcer le
cooperation.
lien et
Thanks
aussi des
to
différents
these
groupes, des
webinars,
membres
we
des
can
organisations
strengthen our links
belges qui
and
font
the
partie de cette
relations
plateforme,
amongst the
mais
different Belgian
également aussi
organizations
leurs
that belong to that
partenaires
platform,
et des différentes
together with the
organisations qui sont impliquées dans le Sud global. Voilà, encore merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui et de prendre le
Gracias por
temps
asistir aquí
de participer à
a
cette
esta
réunion.
reunión.
L'objectif, voilà, c'est vraiment de créer une trajectoire collective d'apprentissage sur différentes dimensions de la transition juste. Aujourd'hui, on va se concentrer particulièrement sur le lien avec les impacts de la protection sociale. Donc, c'est le troisième webinaire, comme je mentionnais. On a déjà eu un premier webinaire aussi qui était plutôt une introduction à la transition juste, et le second était sur le dialogue social. Voilà, vous pouvez éventuellement revoir aussi ces différents webinaires. Voilà, ma collègue on va pouvoir vous envoyer aussi les liens. Sinon, ça se trouve aussi sur le site web de WSM qui héberge le travail aussi en partie de la plateforme de coordination du travail décent. Voilà, ici, vous pouvez déjà voir normalement sur votre écran le planning de la journée d'aujourd'hui, en tout cas le programme des différents et puis les différents panélistes et intervenants, intervenantes qui prendront place. J'ai- Ok, a priori, vous m'entendez encore bien, mais on me dit que je suis déconnectée, donc j'espère que tout va bien. Euh, voilà, donc aujourd'hui, ce troisième webinaire donc de ce cycle de 5 va vraiment se concentrer sur les enjeux de la protection sociale. Et donc, on va d'abord, en revenant au programme, avoir deux interventions peut-être un peu plus théoriques, en tout cas des cadres de référence vont nous provenir voilà, de l'OIT et puis alors aussi du CSC Résilience. Hein. Donc, c'est aussi une plateforme d'organisation d'ONG belges. Enfin, on va avoir après trois présentations un petit peu plus pratiques, vraiment ancrées dans la réalité de différents partenaires qui agissent au Burundi, au Népal et enfin au Zimbabwe. Et puis, on va clôturer aussi avec ce webinaire avec un moment de questions-réponses. À cet effet, ben, je vous invite déjà éventuellement à voir donc, sur votre écran en bas, il y a une petite boîte de dialogue Q et R, hein, donc Q&A, questions-réponses. Donc, je vous invite déjà, pendant le cadre aussi du programme et pendant les interventions, à écrire votre question la plus concise possible et aussi à bien préciser à qui vous adressez votre question. Comme ça, à la fin du webinaire, on aura un moment où on pourra pouvoir avoir un moment un petit peu plus dynamique. Voilà, peut-être à l'entame aussi de ce webinaire, de se dire qu'avec le groupe de travail ici qui a préparé ce webinaire et dont je remercie aussi l'excellent travail de préparation, on s'est posé la question de savoir comment dans le contexte actuel où les crises se multiplient, qu'elles soient économiques, sociales, sécuritaires ou alimentaires, migratoires, environnementales, politiques et diplomatiques, donc elles sont nombreuses, complexes et multiples. Comment est-ce qu'on peut accélérer finalement l'accès à la protection sociale pour tous et toutes et assurer surtout une transition juste? Et donc, c'est bien dans ce cadre d'action vers la transition juste qu'on voudrait voir comment est-ce que la protection sociale s'intègre. On a vu qu'il y a effectivement différents domaines. On a parlé la dernière fois de l'importance du dialogue social pour avoir aussi des sociétés qui soient, autant que faire se peut, résilientes et surtout aussi avec une gouvernance bien gérés. Mais il y a d'autres domaines comme le transfert de compétences avec des secteurs qui sont en mutation, toute la question des transferts de la technologie. Mais si on voulait vraiment se concentrer sur le rôle de la protection sociale pour avoir des politiques intégrées, inclusives et cohérentes. Je pense que la plupart d'entre vous ne sont pas sans savoir que la protection sociale est un droit humain qui a été effectivement consacré dans différents traités, dans différentes conventions, que c'est un outil puissant pour combattre les injustices et les inégalités. Néanmoins, plus de la moitié de la population aujourd'hui n'a pas accès à une couverture de protection sociale. Donc voilà, on veut un petit peu discuter aujourd'hui comment est-ce qu'on peut mettre en œuvre cette protection universelle pour l'ensemble de la population et tout au long de la vie des populations et des personnes, mais dans un monde soumis effectivement de plus en plus aux impacts et aux effets du changement climatique. De plus, cette crise climatique a un impact disproportionné sur les pays et les populations les plus vulnérables, et là aussi où la protection sociale sont les plus bas. Donc concrètement, comment est-ce qu'on peut faire? Voilà, donc pour qu'on puisse anticiper, atténuer, absorber et s'adapter à ces changements et ces chocs en assurant un revenu et l'accès à la santé pour tous et toutes. Voilà, on me demande de parler un petit peu moins vite, alors je vais aussi passer le mot peut-être à la première intervenante, justement, Christina Berendt, qui est la chef du département des politiques sociales à l'Organisation internationale du travail. Elle va justement nous présenter le travail qui a été réalisé dans l'UEIT et nous donner un cadre de référence sur la protection sociale dans le contexte du changement climatique, la transition juste et les politiques climatiques et plus spécifiquement aussi son rôle dans l'atténuation et l'adaptation. Elle présentera les principales conclusions du rapport de l'OIT intitulé Rapport mondial sur la protection sociale 2024-2026, la protection sociale universelle pour l'action climatique et une transition juste. Voilà, Christina, je vous passe la parole et je pense voilà, que vos slides sont déjà là. Merci.
Merci beaucoup Aurélie et merci et je vais passer à l'anglais. So hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone who's joined here, and it's really an absolute pleasure to be with you here, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very much looking forward to the exchanges and also hearing from the other speakers later on. What I have been asked to do is present you the in a very kind of short space of time some of the key insights from the World Social Protection Report 2024 to 26, which has been published in September last year. So I guess some of you might already have seen it and have had a look at it. For those who haven't done it yet, I would really very warmly invite you to actually have a look. And if we could pass to the next slide, please. So this is a report that the ILO publishes every 3 years normally. It's part of a series of reports which really tries to give a global overview of recent developments in social protection systems, including social protection floors, following a life cycle approach. And every time we have a specific thematic focus, and this time the focus is actually on the role of universal social protection in enabling climate action, climate justice, and also a big part of it as a just transition. And given that this is really a series of reports, now for the first time we can actually also come up with better statistical data, including the trend data. And I think this is a very key point also to see and get a sense of what has happened, where do we see improvements, and where things have stalled or even retracted. Maybe just one final word on the report itself. I mean, as you can see there on the slide, we have available the executive summary in 9 languages. The report is currently being translated into French and Spanish, and will come out in these languages as well quite soon. And we have a suite of regional
C'est
companion
dans d'autres
reports,
langues.
one
Et
for
nous avons
Asia
également
Pacific as
toute
well
une
as
série de
here.
rapports
And we're trying to focus
régionaux qui
on a
sont
couple of
préparés.
more
On en
regional
a un
companion
pour
reports,
l'Asie, donc
including,
Pacifique, qui est
and
déjà
this is kind of the
disponible. Et
next
nous
product
travaillons sur
which
quelques
is
autres
going to come
rapports
out.
régionaux. Et
It's
ça, ce
actually
sera un produit qui va
on the
sortir.
topic with a specific
Donc
focus
là,
on
on va
small
se
island
concentrer surtout
developing
sur
states. And for them,
les
obviously, the
États en
question of
développement.
a
Euh,
just transition is
Et pour
particularly
eux, la
critical.
question de la
So,
transition
but let
juste,
us dive
c'est une
right
question tout
into
à fait
the
cruciale.
report. If you could
Mais
just
tout
go to
d'abord,
the next
attardons-nous sur le
slide,
rapport. On
please.
peut passer à la dia suivante, s'il vous plaît.
So,
Donc,
what we're trying to show
ce
here
que
is,
nous
and
essayons
this
de
is
vous
also the
montrer
key
ici,
message of the
et ça c'est
report,
le message clé
is how
d'ailleurs du
much
rapport,
the question of
c'est que
addressing life
finalement,
cycle
la
and other
question,
risks,
donc lorsqu'on aborde ce cycle de
it's really
vie et d'autres
intersecting
risques, eh bien, c'est
climate
une
risks
question
and
où
also
on
the
a ce croisement
consequences
avec
of climate
le changement
policies.
climatique, les conséquences des
And
politiques
it
climatiques.
was quite interesting for us as
Et
well
pour nous,
while we were
c'était
writing the
intéressant,
report,
lorsque nous étions en train de
is
rédiger le
really how
rapport,
much this is
eh bien, c'est
intersecting. I
intéressant
mean,
de
when we
voir dans quelle
started off,
mesure
we
on
had
observe des croisements,
some
des
ideas of
intersections entre différents éléments.
some social protection
On
benefits being
pensait hein,
particularly
donc que certains
relevant,
avantages
for
liés à la
example,
sécurité sociale qui
unemployment
pourraient être
benefits when it
en
comes to
particulier importants,
supporting
notamment des
workers to
allocations de
move from
chômage,
brown
lorsque
sectors into green sectors,
les
and
travailleurs
for example,
devaient
looking at
connaître un
health
transfert de
protection also to
secteurs plus traditionnels vers des
address the
secteurs
health risks.
verts,
But what we
aborder
have
également les
found in
risques liés à
writing
la
is that
santé,
every single bit
mais on s'est rendu compte qu'en fait,
of a social
chaque
protection
élément,
system
chaque
actually has a
parcelle
relation in some
des
way
systèmes
or
de
another to
protection
climate
sociale
change, and
est
every
en
single
lien
one
d'une façon ou d'une autre avec ce changement
is
climatique. Il y a à
relevant.
chaque fois
And
des
so, I mean,
croisements,
whether we
des
talk
liens.
about child and family
Et que
benefits,
l'on
whether we talk about
parle
benefits more
d'allocation
for the working
familiale,
age
que l'on
population,
parle
maternity
d'allocation
benefits,
pour
paternity, parental
les
benefits,
populations en
sickness
âge de
benefits,
travailler, les
employment
avantages,
protection,
les
disability
allocations
benefits,
de
unemployment
maladie,
protection,
la protection
survivors benefits, and then
qui
also
est
going
accordée aux
into the old
chômeurs,
age,
les pensions de survie, et puis
survivor and
lorsqu'on
disability
parle également
pensions, when we look at whether we look at
de
social
personnes plus
assistance,
âgées, également les
or whether we
pensions
look
de
at the big
retraite,
area of
l'assistance
social health
sociale, ou
protection.
bien la
This
protection
is all
de la
very much
sécurité sociale dans
relevant,
son
especially
entièreté. Tout
because
ceci est important
the
et est en
life
lien
cycle risks
parce
and the
que
climate
ces
risks are
risques
very much
liés au cycle de
intersecting.
vie et ces risques climatiques
And
sont véritablement,
so,
connaissent des
for
croisements les uns
example, when
avec
it
les autres.
comes,
Par
to give
exemple,
an example, when it comes to
si je vous cite un
climate-related health
exemple
risks,
par rapport aux risques
obviously, I mean,
de
if you
santé
have
liés au climat, eh bien, bien
certain
sûr,
diseases or
si vous
certain
avez certaines maladies
health
ou
problems
certains
linked to
problèmes de
excessive heat,
santé
for
qui sont
example,
liés à une
it is not
chaleur
clear whether this is
excessive, à une
climate
canicule,
related or whether
ben, on ne
this
sait pas
is,
toujours
I mean,
clairement
from
si
from
c'est lié
a
au
health
climat,
perspective,
hein, ou
or
si
whether this has some other
ça
problems.
provient
But we need
donc
to
d'un
have
problème lié à
a
la
solution
santé.
for
Mais
the
quoi qu'il en
problem,
soit,
and
il
this
faut
is
trouver une
why
solution à ces problèmes.
solid social health
Et c'est
protection
pour ça qu'une protection
and universal
sociale
health coverage is
solide, une
so
couverture
important
sociale
in that
universelle
context.
sont tellement importantes à cet
Likewise, if you
égard.
need an unemployment
De
benefit,
même,
it
si vous
doesn't
avez
matter
besoin
whether this
d'allocation
is
de chômage, peu importe,
you
hein,
have
que
lost your job
vous
because
ayez perdu votre
of
emploi
kind of climate or because
en
of some other
raison
factors.
de changement
It might
climatique
be
ou en
indirectly
raison
related to
d'autres
climate
facteurs,
change.
ça peut être
What you need
indirectement
is
lié également au
unemployment
changement
protection, and I
climatique.
think this
Mais quoi qu'il
really
en soit,
gives
vous
a
avez
very,
besoin de
very strong
protection donc et
argument to
d'allocation
not think of
donc pour vous aider à faire
starting
face
something
à cette
similar
situation de
or
chômage.
something
D-
separate,
Donc, il ne faut pas voir
but
les
really
choses
making sure
dans
that
des
social
silos séparés.
protection
Il faut
systems
veiller à ce
are
que les systèmes de
strengthened, are
protection sociale soient
reinforced,
renforcés
and are
véritablement
adapted
et
so
qu'ils
that
soient
they can
également
actually also
adaptés de
accommodate
façon à pouvoir
the climate
également
risk.
faire
And
face
talking
et
about
réagir,
both
répondre
the
aux
risks that
risques
are
climatiques.
related to the
Lorsqu'on
impact of
parle
climate risk,
donc
but
des risques
also
liés à
the
l'impact
risks
du
are
changement
related to
climatique,
the
mais
impact
également les
of
risques
climate
liés à
policies,
l'impact des politiques climatiques,
which you see here.
hein, que
And I
vous
think this
observez
really gives
également
a
à
very
droite.
strong
Et ça vous donne
argument for strengthening
des
social
arguments
protection systems.
afin de renforcer les
And
systèmes
can
de
we move to the
protection
next slide,
sociale.
please?
Pouvons-nous passer à la dia suivante, s'il vous
And
plaît?
I mean, I
Et
understand that you have
enfin,
been
je,
working and discussing quite a lot of questions around the just transition, around adaptation, around mitigation. So, and actually, when we look at the role of social protection systems, it is important that it can really help countries to better address all of that. it can help in the adaptation to climate change, and first and foremost also by reducing vulnerabilities ex ante, but then also protecting against the impact of disasters and also helping and supporting adaptive capacity for livelihoods, transitions and diversification. But then similarly, when we talk about the mitigation side of things, it's again compensating and cushioning the negative impact of climate policies. And also I've mentioned the transition towards kind of green and decent jobs, helping with the conservation or restoration of carbon sinks. But also another element is also thinking about the greening of pension funds, which is also a very important aspect. So you really see that this is very much cutting across, and you'll find a more detailed discussion of that in the report. But the big challenge here is that we actually have very limited social protection coverage so far. And if we can go to the next slide, we see that despite quite a marked increase in coverage since 2015, from 42.8% of the global population to 52.4% of the global population, it is still only about half of the global population that is actually covered by social protection. And the kind of indicator here is a quite, well, minimalistic indicator in the sense that we're looking here at coverage by at least one social protection benefit. So, so this is, I mean, we're not, I mean, for this specific indicator, we all know that coverage by one social protection benefit will not be enough because people really need to be covered throughout their entire life course. So they actually might need much more than that, and they need to have adequate protection. And obviously, as could be expected, we see quite stark differences also across world regions. So, I mean, we see, I mean, for example, when it comes to Europe and Central Asia, we're seeing that coverage, if measured by that indicator, really is relatively high, moving towards universal social protection coverage. But then when we look at, for example, at Africa or the Arab states, we see that the coverage rates are much lower. And also we see that they haven't really changed that much over time. I mean, we see that between 2015 and 2023, for example, we've seen quite a substantial increase in coverage, both in the Americas and Asia and the Pacific. But this was not the case to the same extent in Africa and the Arab states. And they're really lagging behind. And looking at it from a climate perspective, what is particularly concerning is that those countries which have the highest vulnerability against climate risks, they are often the ones with kind of very little coverage. And if we can move to the next slide, please. So what we can see here in the 20 countries that are actually most vulnerable against climate change, the effective coverage is only 8.7% of the population. So not even 10% of the population has some form of social protection coverage, let alone adequate coverage. And this is really something which is simply not acceptable. If we extend that a bit to the 50 most vulnerable countries, the coverage increases to 25% of the population, so one quarter of the population. But we know very well that this, again, it will not be enough. So countries need to be to do much better in improving coverage and developing their social protection systems. So if we move to the next slide, please, we have a bit of a more detailed view, you see the overall coverage indicator at the very top. So this is the population covered by at least one social protection benefit. But then if we break that down, looking, for example, at children, specifically looking at the maternity benefits for mothers with newborns, persons with severe disabilities, for workers in case of work injury, the unemployed, older persons, and vulnerable persons covered by social assistance, we see that there is really quite a stark difference across world regions. And also here we see that especially the situation in Africa is really very, very concerning. And I can only invite you again to have a look at the report, because there you find more information also by country income level, by kind of sub-region, and also by country. And I should also say that this particular indicator, this is one of the SDG indicators. This is indicator 131. But then in the report, you also find many more indicators on coverage, but also on adequacy, and also on expenditure and financing. And if we have time, I can show you a bit on financing afterwards, but I'm not sure whether we're going to have the time there. But maybe one point that I wanted to kind of zoom in a bit more, because I think this is an important point also to remember. I mean, we're looking at social protection really from a life course perspective, as you've seen before. I mean, looking at children, looking at persons of working age, looking at older persons, and then obviously looking at also the issue of health across the life course. And when we look at the discussion on social protection, quite a lot of the discussion is actually on children and older persons, which is very, very important. But sometimes we lack a bit a more detailed view actually on social protection for workers. And this is why I wanted to go in the next slide a bit more deeper on the coverage of workers, and just kind of highlight one particular point that we've been showing in the report. And this is actually what we have tried here, is really to look at a social protection coverage for those who are in employment, and looking at it from also and breaking it down by status in employment. So we wanted to distinguish what is the level of coverage for employees, and then also subdivide it a bit, looking at where are the inequalities when it comes to full-time versus part-time workers, where do we see differences when it comes to those with permanent contracts and temporary contracts, and very importantly also compare employees and the self-employed, because we know that a big part of the social protection gaps are actually linked also to the status of employment and to the type of employment. So we wanted to get a bit of a better sense of how countries compare in that respect, and also to see what is the impact of policies in that respect. And we were quite surprised, as you can see from that graph. And maybe if you just look at the blue bars, which are the coverage rate for employees, and the green dots, which are the coverage rates for the self-employed, it was quite interesting how much variation there was across countries. So, I mean, the idea that we sometimes see in discussions to say, oh yeah, only kind of full-time permanent employees are well covered and all the rest of workers is not covered. This is certainly not true. We see much more variation in that. And what is particularly encouraging, also looking at the self-employed, we we see that some countries actually manage to cover the self-employed quite well. Still with quite substantial coverage gaps, but we see that policies in that regard, and I've just highlighted two countries here, I've highlighted Turkey and Brazil, that really specific policies to also improve social protection coverage for self-employed workers, they actually do have an impact and they do show in the data. And I think this is really something, an important lesson also for countries to see that those policies actually do have a positive impact. So I'm afraid I need to skip a bit about the next slide. I mean, I had two more slides on the social protection expenditure and financing. Maybe just a quick word on expenditure. And so it's really, I mean, obviously, different levels of coverage also come with different levels of expenditure, and we see quite some diversity also across countries, which is not surprising. But that is also important to really think about social protection expenditure as an investment in people, and as an investment also in the capacity of countries to actually address challenges such as climate risks and really make sure that these can be dealt with in an equitable and sustainable way. I mean, I think this is really what we talk about when we talk about a just transition, and ensuring to filling those financing gaps is really important. And I think especially this year, as we're now preparing for the Financing for Development conference in Sevilla, as we prepare for the next COP and also the World Summit for Social Development, I think these are very critical points that are important to highlight. And actually the ILO has been working with partners also to propose a target of increasing coverage of 2 percentage points per year. And I can provide you with a link later on that point. So maybe just to conclude, and sorry, can we jump to the one more, please? Thank you. So really, what's the way forward? I think the big lesson there is really of getting the basics right. So really making sure that we strengthen national social protection systems, and both the social insurance elements and also the tax financed elements, so that we can actually close those coverage and adequacy gaps, ensuring at least a basic level of social security for everyone. This is the social protection floor, but also thinking also about higher levels of protection for as many people as possible, to really make sure that there is also adequate protection, and making sure that especially disadvantaged and marginalized groups are being covered. And I think I've made the other points here already, so we can jump to the final slide, please. And really maybe just two more points here about also making sure, and I think this is a key element as well, of making social protection systems gender responsive. And I think especially in a context the climate crisis, this is really a very critical point here, also to ensure that there is really equity when it comes to gender equality, but also equity when it comes to other forms of inequality. And then I've made the point already on the financing, the sustainable and equitable financing of universal social protection systems, and possibly also thinking about a link to climate finance in that respect. And maybe I should close here. There is another final slide with some more references for reading, so I can only invite you maybe have a look at it later when the presentation is shared. I assume it would be shared. So thank you very much, and back to you, Aurélie.
Thank you so much, Christina. Voilà, je vais repasser en français. Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation. Voilà, très, très intéressante aussi. On a déjà certaines questions dans le chat. Donc voilà, je vous invite à continuer à poser vos questions dans la boîte vraiment destinée aux questions et réponses. Et je pense que le lien est vraiment fait sur l'importance d'avoir un système de protection sociale effectivement robuste pour tous et toutes, tout au long de la vie. Voilà, d'expliquer que tous les aspects de protection sociale sont importants à prendre pour avoir un système qui fait face justement et qui répond aussi aux effets du changement climatique et pour pouvoir gérer un petit peu tous les risques auxquels on fait face et auxquels malheureusement on voit tous les jours les effets et particulièrement pour les populations plus exposées. Merci aussi d'avoir fait le lien avec d'avoir des politiques aussi gender mainstreaming, hein, comme on dit en anglais, donc responsive effectivement au genre pour qu'elles soient le plus adaptées possible. Voilà, avec ces mots, je vais faire le lien aussi avec la présentation de notre second intervenant qui, voilà, on parle de systèmes robustes, de systèmes résilients. Et en fait, ben, c'est des mots qui sont déjà utilisés, des concepts qui sont déjà utilisés par différents partenaires. Et ici, en Belgique, on a voilà, Johan Slimbrouck qui va nous faire une petite intervention aussi de comment est-ce qu'on peut mobiliser ce principe-là aussi dans le cadre d'action et de partenariat aussi de la coopération internationale. Voilà, donc Johan est le coordinateur du cadre stratégique commun résilience, donc qui se nomme CECORES et qui regroupe différentes ONG belges actives dans le secteur de l'environnement et donc plus largement de la résilience justement. Il travaille pour John of Water, qui est une ONG belge qui garantit l'accès à l'eau et à la protection de l'environnement. Et il va aborder voilà, ces différents enjeux de la résilience pour voir comment est-ce qu'on peut adapter notre environnement, mais aussi mettre cela en perspective dans nos pratiques sociales. Voilà, Johan, c'est à toi et je pense que tu partages directement tes slides, si je ne me trompe pas.
Je pensais que vous alliez les partager, me donner le contrôle, mais c'est OK, je peux partager mon écran.
Oui? OK, merci. Si c'est plus facile.
Voilà. Je ne sais pas si vous le voyez.
Perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So I will switch to English. So thank you for inviting us for this interesting webinar on just transition and social protection. I would like to give a very short introduction about the social-ecological resilience approach, and maybe that can also be useful in your thinking and your analyze the work of analysis you do when talking about just transition and social protection. Just like you said, Aurélie, CECORES is a Belgian network on social-ecological resilience. We have 3 objectives: to exchange and to learn, because we are a sole learning organization, to advocate on the importance of resilience and to stimulate synergies. And we have actually 7 members. But we have quite a lot of collaboration with CSOs in different countries, universities, research institutes, and the organizations that will talk after me is also one of the partner organizations of Joint for Water in Burundi. So I can make the link to what ADISCO will talk about later on. So these are the organizations, as I said, mostly working in, let's say, natural resources environment. But we have also Via Don Bosco, for instance, with us. Via Don Bosco active in education and skills and the professionalization of young people. And so also a very important work when talking about resilience. So very shortly, some concepts. When we talk about resilience, that's the ability to cope with change and to continue to develop. A very, let's say, simple definition, but very important. And an ecosystem, I don't have to explain to what is an ecosystem, the dynamic entity of communities of plants, animals, and microorganisms and their non-living environment interacting as a functional unit. But you have forest ecosystems, river basins, but you have also urban ecosystems, and more people live in urban contexts. And so urban ecosystems become much more important than before on a global scale. And then, of course, if we talk about what are socio-ecological systems, in fact, these are the systems linked between man and nature. And there comes the whole issue also about social protection, the things that the speaker before me highlighted already, the need for social protection if you want to have more resilience towards effects, external effects, as you have climate change. And a socio-ecological system is not only, like you see on the photo on the right, in a rural area, but also the photo on the left, where you have more and more cities, where you have parts of the cities where you have also let's say natural parts, and where you have to make the link between humans and nature. So socio-ecological resilience is then, of course, the capacity to adapt or to transform in the face of change in socio-ecological systems, and so as to continue to support human well-being. Important lessons are, first of all, that socio-ecological systems are not limited to rural areas, but also important for the urban context, including everything regarding industry, enterprises, etc. And so they need to consider the whole and complex system and not only parts of it. And resilience can thus be seen as an objective, as a desired status of a socio-ecological system, taking both, and that's important, social and ecological characteristics into account. And that's why we speak about resilience of socio-ecological systems. However, socio-ecological resilience is also an approach. It's a way of looking to some projects. It gives a lens to analyze contexts and to take actions from a resilience perspective. And how do we do that, or how does this approach work? It's by asking questions for each project that will intervene in socio-ecological systems, reflecting on what the components of the systems are and how possible solutions will interact. And so we use 5 questions as a basis for integrating the resilience of social and ecological components into each project management. And I will go through these 5 type of questions with some examples from Burundi of a collaboration between several organizations, including, as I said already before, ADISCO, who will give also a presentation about social protection and just transition in Burundi. And there's 5 questions. The first question is, what is the system in which you are working? It's so resilience of what? It needs a context analysis. Do you work in a rural area like in Burundi? You see there the agroecological, some photos of the agroecological zone of Mumirwa with steep hills subject to erosion, but also densely populated. With agriculture being done on steep slopes and in valleys, with small craft business, but also exploitation of minerals in and along rivers, with unequal access to drinking water. So the first question is, if you talk about resilience of a socio-ecological system, what are we talking about? And could also be apply this question in each context regarding decent work. The second question, which components of the systems need to be strengthened? So resilience for what purpose? To what end? Why do we want to have, to what is the objective of the resilience? And for instance, that means that we need to understand social, economic, and ecological components. And for the example in Burundi, and I think that ADISCO will go more in detail on that, it's to reinforce organized local communities and cooperatives, to support active local governments, to increase representation of women and their role in decision-making, to improve food and nutrition security, stop a loss of biodiversity, and give sustainable access to and management of drinking and productive water. So that's the second question. Which components of the systems do we want to strengthen? The third question is, who will benefit from these actions? Resilience for whom? That means knowing all the stakeholders, authorities, communities, private sectors, unions of workers, associations, etc. And in our experience, that is maybe one of the most difficult questions, because resilience, for instance, also to climate change, is very dependent on the group you belong to. Members of a local community, local authorities, members of NGOs, they will have other opinions, other positions towards resilience. They will have other effects of climate change. They will need other solutions to cope with climate change. So the whole stakeholder analysis of all different actors and all different people and persons in a social-ecological system is very important to find the right answers regarding social-ecological resilience. The fourth question is, what are the disruptions of your system against which you need to build resilience? Resilience to what? So means to be aware of shocks and stresses. However, we don't talk about, or not always talking about suddenly shocks. The photo you see, for instance, is a refugee camp in Burundi due to the tensions and the problems in the east of Congo, which causes a refugee flow towards Burundi. And let's say that it's more a sudden shock, but you have also the climate change is giving raises of temperature, irregular rainfalls, and so gradually you have always more stresses that will influence your socio-ecological system. And so the fourth question is, you have to know and be aware of what the shocks and stresses are. And this can also be applied, I think, in, let's say, working conditions and the area of decent work. And the final question is then, how will resilience be strengthened? That's more what type of activities we do. Or the question is resilience through what? And then, then you have the type of activities that you can, as Secores, regroup in four groups of activities. The first is improved policies, and this in Burundi would be on mineral extraction, on the management of drinking water, etc. The second part is knowledge and sensitization on locally adapted measures. And for Burundi, it would be, for instance, to stop erosion, to increase quality of the water and the soil. The fourth one is to increase access to ecosystem services and the management of these ecosystem services. And in the case of Burundi, it would be, for instance, drinking water, water for agriculture, locally adapted agricultural techniques. And the fourth axe to work on is increased protection of ecosystems. And in the case of Burundi, could be the increased protection of water resources, anti-erosion measures on steep slopes, and reforestation, for instance. And so the four axes, in fact, are also these four axes on policies, knowledge, the access to ecosystem services, and the protection and restoration of ecosystems. let's say, are the four strategic axes that as secretaries we believe you have to work on to strengthen socio-ecological resilience. And so there's 5 questions. The 5 questions, let's say, what is the system? Resilience of what? Which components? Resilience for what purpose? To what end? The third one, resilience for whom? Who will benefit from the actions? The fourth one, what are the disruptions or resilience to what? And the fifth question, resilience to what? As another network, not working on or being active in decent work, but on more socio-ecological systems, we think that these questions can also probably help to reflect on just transition and decent work, and can help you to find appropriate answers and actions to do so. So further reading, you can find this is also described in a brochure on the website of Secretaries, and I thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Johan. Voilà, pour nous avoir donné finalement ces lunettes un petit peu sur la résilience, et avec aussi ces 5 questions précises pour voir comment est-ce qu'on peut les utiliser avec un système de protection sociale justement adaptatif et robuste aussi aux effets du changement climatique. Donc, merci beaucoup pour cela, et on voit aussi qu'effectivement, enfin en tout cas nous, on voit vraiment la protection sociale comme un outil justement de résilience, et pour assurer aussi les droits sociaux qui soient réalisés pour l'ensemble des populations, et aussi pour que les populations puissent avoir aussi être résilientes finalement aux chocs, comme tu mentionnais aussi, qui vont arriver. Pour être résiliente, justement, un aspect qui nous semble crucial aussi, c'est la gouvernance, et c'est le rôle de la société civile, justement, et la place qu'il prend dans le dialogue social, mais pas uniquement, vraiment son intervention et sa participation active, avec des dialogues avec aussi l'État, mais certainement aussi dans leur pratique, et comment finalement ils peuvent avoir une réponse très précise et adaptée aux populations en place. Tu as fait déjà le lien aussi avec justement notre prochain intervenant au niveau d'ADISCO. Donc, je pense que on va pouvoir l'accueillir. Voilà, Japhet Nakintije, qui est le secrétaire exécutif de la Fédération des mutuelles des caféiculteurs. Donc, qui va parler justement d'ADISCO, l'initiative donc au Burundi, qui est appui au développement intégral à la solidarité sur les collines. ADISCO, donc, c'est une organisation de l'économie sociale et solidaire active dans la production de café. Elle collabore donc avec 34 mutuelles de santé des caféiculteurs et permet l'accès aux soins de santé de qualité à plus de 7000 ménages de caféiculteurs. Voilà, vous disposez aussi chez ADISCO d'un manuel d'agroécologie pour la promotion des pratiques et des systèmes alimentaires durables, résilients et adaptatifs justement au changement climatique. Et donc, comme on l'a déjà mentionné, voilà, vous êtes un partenaire évidemment de Solsoc, mais aussi d'autres ONG belges comme John for Water, Louvain Coopération et Burundi. Voilà, Jean, merci de parler maintenant de vos pratiques. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour à toutes et à tous. C'est Japhet Nakintije, secrétaire exécutif de la FEMSCABU. Je vous partage l'expérience de la FEMSCABU dans le domaine de la protection sociale pour une transition juste. La présentation de la FEMSCABU. Donc, c'est une fédération des mutuelles de santé des caféiculteurs du Burundi qui est créée le 14 juin 2011. Mais signalons que les premières mutuelles ont été créées en 2008. Nous avons comme vision tous les paysans burundais ont accès à des soins de santé de qualité à travers les mutuelles.
Peasants from Burundi should get access to quality healthcare through community mutuals that take part in decision-making process when it comes to social protection. And our mission is that we organize training actions, information sessions, raising awareness programs, and plea programs for access for all of farmers to the healthcare when it comes to health, so through health mutuals. And we also work to improve the working and living conditions of our members. We have 4 action strategies, so self-promotion, solidarity, also social welfare, and we are rooted really within the grassroots. So we are an active member of CONAMUS, which is the National Confederation of the Community Mutuals in Burundi, and we are also a member of the National Platform of Social Economy and Solidarity-Based Economy. Our fields of action, so FEMUS-CABU intervenes in social protection fields. We developed next services, sickness insurance. Also, we provide assistance in case of death, disease prevention, local solidarity, defense of genders. So, why were we set up? So, FEMUS-CABU it was created by ADISCO, an NGO from Burundi, and we received funding from the Belgian authorities through SOLSOC, a Belgian NGO. In Burundi, only civil servants, well, they were the only ones that could get some sickness insurance through public mutual benefits. The others had to pay themselves to receive some benefits if they got sick. FEMUS-CABU was set up in order to meet this crucial need for fair access to health care. So this is what really pushed us to set up FEMUS-CABU. And when it comes, well, to the current situation of FEMUS-CABU, so today we have 35 health mutuals, and we have more than 12,000 households that are covered, and we have 62,000 beneficiaries that get this health insurance coverage. We intervene in 12 of the 18 provinces of the country, and we cover 48 out of the 119 municipalities. We are also connected to cooperatives that are regrouped within UNESCO. So we intervene and we want to work for social protection that promotes a just transition. So FEMUS-CABU wants to improve also the contribution capacities of the members. The members pay their fees. FEMUS-CABU has to carry out actions in order to improve the fees that can be paid by their members by organizing the members of FEMUS-CABU within solidarity and self-promotion groups through a connection with cooperatives. So today, 80% of the mutual health are related and connected with health mutual cooperatives. And we also contribute to the setting up of coffee washing stations. So these are initiatives that are taken by coffee growing cooperatives. Then we also carry out actions in order to promote the environment in 3 fields: hygiene, sanitation, protection of the river basins, and agroecology. So we intervene in these 3 fields when it comes to environmental protection. So the first field is health and sanitation. Here, the members of AMUSCABU organize a number of actions. First, the members contribute to the sanitation of partner structures in order to improve the health status of the sanitary structures. So we also work to protect water meant for human consumption. We also improve the health situation of the health mutual offices, and the members also contribute to the sanitation of public areas by collecting, for instance, non-biodegradable objects. So these are mainly plastic bottles which are being collected. And we also organize health education campaigns. So these are awareness-raising campaigns that target the population in order to prevent diseases. The second aspect is related to the protection of river basins. We conduct some actions here in order to meet the impacts of climate changes. For instance, we raise the awareness of the members regarding anti-erosive measures when it comes to the fields of coffee growers. We also plant bamboos along the rivers in order to limit the collapse of the river basins. We also contribute to the layout of wells, and we also work around public buildings like schools in order to really try and mitigate the runoff impacts that might lead to serious damage on river basins. Through agroecology, the members of the mutual also contribute to the promotion of agroecology in the family farms. Agroecological practices that have been developed are, for instance, the promotion of agroforestry practices, also the association of the coffee farms with the plantation of trees that provide for shade. We also introduce fertilization with organic manure. So we introduce these measures with the members of AMUSCABU. And as I said, we are also working in close cooperation with cooperatives. And so these cooperatives are also regrouped in a parent organization. And then we also work in gender integration. So in all our actions, we also need to incorporate the gender dimension. We've already adopted a gender policy that provides some clear-cut guidance when it comes to women's participation. For the time being, we have seen been some remarkable progress when it comes to women's participation in the governance of the mutualist movement. Out of 35 health mutuals, 11 out of the 35 are chaired by women. And when it comes to the boards of directors of these health mutuals, well, we have 36% of women. And within the supervisory board, you see 38% of women. FEMUS CABU is also involved in the promotion of positive masculinity, as we call it. And we are also organizing some basic groups in order to promote the participation of women and young people.
And we also have persons working with the FEMUS CABU. It is the very good connection between the cooperative in order to have the mobilization of contributions and also to get a good collaboration between families in the social economy and solidarity-based economy. And this is very important. Also, it is important to privilege this cooperation, collaboration between the solidarity and social economy. We have to develop other insurance products, including those that promote greater resilience to climate change. This is very important. And so we need to participate and we can have a good universal coverage. And this has to be well managed and also take part in the advocacy work with the authorities for a transition that respects the rights of the rural world and of peasants and farmers in particular. And then afterwards, we have a few challenges to take up in our actions. The first challenge is that health insurance companies are not recognized as actors working in environmental protection. And so hence their actions are not capitalized on by the public services responsible for this area. And this is very important to do this to protect the environment. And I can tell you here that until today, the FEMUS CABU has not been able to establish a mechanism to assist victims of climate change. Not yet. And in fact, it is a challenge which is linked to the participation of FEMUS CABU in the participation in spaces for construction and exchange on national policies for adaptation to climate change. And until now, we have not been able to participate in those spaces for construction and exchange on national policies because at FEMUS CABU and other health insurances, we are not recognized as actors acting for this climate change and climate protection. This is what we need to keep on doing. And this is now, we have a few images, a few pictures of what we are doing at the FEMUS CABU. You have here the mutualists participating in the sanitation of a health center. And this is also a partner of FEMUS CABU in order to improve the sanitation of a health center. And so here it would be very good to have this cooperation within the mutual health company and the FEMUS CABU. And I'm asking you to just end with those pictures. Yes, show us the pictures, but after that we'll have to stop your presentation. So this is an installation of some to facilitate the infiltration of rainwater. So you can see there, these are planting bamboo in the ravines by the Musigati Mutual Society. We are planting bamboos there. And here you have a mutualist women's group, and it is an animal solidarity chain. That's very important. Also, the animal solidarity chain. And then here you have the savings in health insurance, and this through grassroots anchor groups. So we are trying to collect money at the level of the organization. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. You have shared with us, Jean, your different practices, and we were able to see how
vous pouvez vraiment lier ces questions de protection sociale aussi finalement adaptatives et préventives aussi aux différents effets du changement climatique ou en tout cas voilà, de préservation aussi de l'environnement, mais alors aussi avec le système assurantiel, comme vous expliquiez, le lien avec les coopératives, tous les acteurs de l'économie sociale et solidaire, avec aussi ceux des mutuelles de santé. Donc voilà, le fait de trouver vraiment, avoir des solutions et des collaborations innovantes, c'est aussi un point important d'avoir un système de protection sociale adaptatif. Merci beaucoup vraiment pour votre intervention. Et on voit aussi, voilà, vous avez bien mis en avant le rôle que vous jouez aussi dans la gouvernance. Alors, il y a la question de gouvernance interne, mais effectivement aussi avec l'État, de comment est-ce que vous pouvez collaborer. Vous avez évoqué effectivement l'importance du plaidoyer. Et justement, notre prochain intervenant va expliquer un petit peu comment eux, ils ont pu être impliqués dans la définition de politique nationale. Principalement sur les lignes directrices pour obtenir une protection sociale adaptative. Ici, vraiment par rapport au choc qui arrive de plus en plus, notamment, mais pas uniquement, notamment dû aux effets du changement climatique. Donc voilà, on va accueillir alors sans plus tarder Rajendra Chaulagain de Social Protection Civil Society Network au Népal. Donc SPCSN. C'est aussi un membre du réseau INSP Népal, donc, qui regroupe différentes organisations de la société civile sur justement la défense du droit à la protection sociale. Et Rajendra ici va nous donner le témoignage de son organisation sur la manière dont les systèmes de protection sociale peuvent justement prendre en compte ces chocs climatiques pour s'adapter. Et donc, ils ont produit un manuel de formation sur la protection sociale destiné à former les membres d'Inspire Népal, mais aussi pour plaider collectivement pour développer un plan et surtout des lignes directrices adaptées au contexte népalais. Voilà, c'est un plan qui a été adapté en 2024. Voilà, Rajendra, the floor is yours. Just maybe before giving you the floor, sorry, just to mention
Juste avant de vous donner la parole, je voudrais dire à tous les participants
in the Q&A box, so not in the chat itself, but in the Q&A box, and we will use it the remaining time to answer it. And otherwise, we just try to answer also directly into this box. Thank you, Rajendra. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity and have a time to meet these wonderful people. Hi, namaste, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Rajendra Chaulagain from Social Protection Civil Society Network and representing Inspire Nepal as well. I proudly represent Nepal, the birthplace of Lord Buddha and home to highest mountain, Mount Everest. So today, just I am sharing how social protection program can be adaptive or shock responsive. So in this perspective, today I am sharing you a very short presentation where the government of Nepal has endorsed recently the shock responsive social protection and relief distribution standard, which is one of the a very good initiation taken by the government, how social protection, this program can be adaptive during different shocks and crises. So in this perspective, I am sharing, let me start about my organization's introduction. We are member-based or network where we have 19 member organizations. They are representing all over the country and advocating for better social protection programs and systems in Nepal. As SPCSN, as we call it in short, our network is a resource organization where we publish our peer-reviewed journal which is dedicated to social protection. So every year we publish social protection journal in Nepal, which highlights the global context of social protection as well as the context of Nepal through research-based article. Another, our organized team of different organizations, as we are networks, so our member organizations are representing all over the country and also representing different group of people. Those are very marginalized and disadvantaged. And we are very strongly advocating to the government of Nepal in the issues of social protection, especially focusing on the issues of children, women, persons with disabilities, senior citizens, and other vulnerable populations, as we call those informal economy sector or informal workers. Let me just brief the disaster context of Nepal. Nepal is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, where yearly more than thousands people lost their lives. Here, within the last 10 years, more than 12,000 people lost their lives. Thousands of people injured, displaced, and losses their housing and the property. Actually, these contexts make more marginalized and disadvantaged to those group who was already very vulnerable. Actually, like persons with disabilities, women, children, and other remote communities, they face higher risks due to limited access to service and information. Increasing this urbanization, deforestation, and unplanned development, these are making those disaster and which is mostly affecting those vulnerable populations. As we can see, the last 10 years, different incidents or disaster occurred in Nepal. Is in 2015, there's the earthquake which hit 7.8 magnitude earthquake hits Nepal, where more than 8,000 people died due to this earthquake. Another monsoon floods, tornado, which is first recorded in Nepal, monsoon floods and landslides, and another Melanchi floods, another earthquake, monsoon floods. This means these are major incidents that happened and which destroyed many populations with their loss of lives and loss of different properties. As now I am just focusing on shock responsive social protection and relief distribution standard, which is one guideline standard the government of Nepal recently endorsed. And for this to come up in this stage is, as network, our organizations, our network had multiple times lobby advocacy and had multiple recommendations to the governments how these disaster affected communities as well as those vulnerable communities can be responded timely, inclusive, and accountable ways. So the government of Nepal now implementing these programs under National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority, which is one of the component of government officials. They are advocating, they are ensuring this overall procedure. This standard, I'm just talking about shock responsive or adaptive social protection, how these standard work for those population or Nepalese populations of timely and or in a good ways of this response. This is why this standard is for delays and confusion in relief distribution. It break the situation of delays and confusion in relief distribution. Another, overlaps and exclusions of affected families and inaccessibility for vulnerable groups, lack of integrated monitoring and reporting those systems, and diverse hazard specific guidelines causing inconsistency. So to mitigate these issues or these obstacles, this new standard is now existence in Nepal to mitigate these issues. The objectives of this standard is to ensure quick, organized and inclusive relief, mobilize social protection systems during disaster. Is in Nepal, non-contributory based social protection is about 9 types, where cash distribution to senior citizens, 2 cash distribution, allowance distribution to children below 5. There are 9 types of non-contribution based social protection in Nepal. So this system, to mobilize this system and to make effective social protection these systems, this standard is now active. Another, support early recovery and livelihood reconstruction and empower local governments with a unified approach. The focus areas of this standard are to use existing social protection system for disaster response, target poor and at-risk communities, includes relief, recovery, and rehabilitation, built on information, registration, payment, and grievance system. The legal foundation, this standard is formed under the Section 39 of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017. It established minimum standard for shelter, food, and wash, assistance for vulnerable groups, and livelihood restoration and one-door system. Actually, this standard also highlighted during the disaster is forecast-based cash assistance as well. When there is the forecast and the prediction is about to have pre-vasting different disaster, then this system can contribute to provide cash assistance before the disaster, any disaster, so that this make more prepared to the vulnerable populations in terms of preparing food or stockpiling different items, and all and also to displace or to uh, move from most vulnerable areas to the safer areas. This standard of this standard focused on these areas here. And another key features of this standard, SOC responsive social protection standard, is unified guideline replacing multiple fragmented standards. Actually, in the context of Nepal, there are 3 layers of government, 3 tiers of governments. They are their unique roles, responsibilities. Is in federal level, they have the roles of formulating different policies in federal level, and in province level, there is another government. They have their own role, and in local level, these systems mostly focusing or mobilizing local governments, where their roles are most to address different shocks and different disaster or different shocks. Another, wonder relief delivery system by local disaster funds. These guidelines focuses on a one-door relief delivery system. And another, avoids duplications and improves data collection system, includes grants for private housing and livelihood. These are key features of the standard. Relief coverage, actually this standard mentioned that cover natural and government declare non-natural disaster, and an initial damage assistance guide relief decision, authority delivery through LDMC. This means local disaster management committee or district level disaster management committee. Here, the standard clearly mentions that how immediate relief standard, it creates how the government or the civil society, they want response, they need to follow this standard. And here are some basic principles to be followed. Actually, the standard highlighted there should be the camps for displaced families, cash in kind support up to 15 days. This means in Nepalese rupees 15 to 20,000 they can, or the government should immediately provide as relief support. Another special grants also providing to those households who lost their family members. Amount is 2 lakh, and also providing assistance to those death or lost families for their funeral, that is 50,000, and other injury treatment and transport support should be provided by the government. These declarations is here where the government should provide this in case of any incidents, natural disaster occurred and lost families. And another, the standard also highlighted or mentions this standard here. Early recovery and housing grants, 50,000 in 2 installment for temporary housing. The governments declared that 50,000 is providing as temporary housing, and grant for housing reconstruction, as Nepal is geographically divided into 3 regions: mountains, hills, and Torai. The access to transportation and other facilities is very difficult and very hard to mountains and hills in compared to Torai region. So the grants is also divided as per its geographical difficulties and conditions, where 5 lakhs is providing, Nepalese rupees 5 lakhs providing to mountains, 4 lakhs to hills, and 3 lakhs to Torai or Madhes. When livelihood recovery support, I'm just going to conclude this presentation. So I just see the camera on. This means I need to conclude my presentation. So in
Yes,
livelihood
please.
recovery support, there is the provision of cash for
Yeah, we lost you for a second, but I think you're back on.
sorry, sure. Is it audible?
Yes, now it is. We just couldn't hear you for a second, but now you're back
Yes,
on for the conclusion. I think you were at. Thanks.
I'm here. Okay. Livelihood recovery support here in standard, it is mentioned cash for work provisions and also livelihood grants for those affected household or families. Inclusion of skill training, enterprise, or consequential loans is also provisioned in the standard. And another, based on detailed damage and needs assessment, the government is about to declare further assistance to those affected households by different disaster. The standard mention beneficiary identification, which is one most important part of this overall social protection assistance, where the standard mention priority is given, or priority will be given to those social security beneficiaries. Those are already receiving certain amount, is being they are vulnerable, or they are falls on different vulnerable categories. So those populations are prioritized first during different crises or disaster. Use existing poor household and social securities list and world level listing and final beneficiaries by local disaster management committee. Implementation and grievance is the cash will be transferred through bank system, and grievance system is there. Those who left receiving different relief or cash will be complain, or will be register their complaints to local government authority. Quarterly reporting by local bodies and data recorded disaster information system. There is the one information data management system, which will be the major part of how or how many populations are affected by this different disaster will be recorded immediately in the central data system. way forward is now the need to implement this standard. First, we need to build the capacity of local government. As the standard mentioned, the more responsibility is given to local government. So our civil society and the government's role is to make more capacitated to implement this standard. Another strengthen coordination with different partners, different organizations, national and international. And in align with these standard, the government should reform or amend different policies related to social protection system. Actually, the cash transfer standard or the Social Protection Security Act, Social Security Act, and different acts are existed here. So based on this standard, those policies should be amended immediately. Another, ensure transparency, efficiency, and equity in relief delivery. These are the overall documents which I tried to cover within my given time frame. I'm sorry I took more 2-3 additional times, 2 minutes to share this standard tasks. Thank you very much for your patience and listening to me throughout my presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rajendra. I will switch in French for the interpreter. Merci beaucoup, hein, merci beaucoup d'avoir effectivement partagé votre expérience et la façon dont vous avez participé, voilà, à l'élaboration de ce nouveau standard pour répondre au choc. On sera vraiment très intéressé de pouvoir suivre de comment est-ce que vous allez continuer à collaborer pour la mise en œuvre, hein, comme vous l'avez mentionné aussi. Et voilà, qui sera certainement un défi, mais vraiment de voir ces différents cadres et guidelines, ces lignes directrices qui ont été mises en place pour être préparées et vraiment être résilients finalement avant, pendant et après les crises. Et aussi le rôle finalement que la protection sociale et les différents aspects de protection sociale peuvent venir renforcer des populations, comme vous l'avez dit, particulièrement les populations vulnérables, mais de manière générale l'ensemble des communautés. Voilà, sans plus tarder, on va accueillir notre troisième intervenant au niveau des pratiques, on va dire, hein, qui vient d'une organisation au Zimbabwe. Donc, Austin Muswere est le secrétaire général adjoint de GAPWUZ. Donc, c'est le syndicat national des travailleurs et travailleuses agricoles, voilà, qui accompagne aussi ces travailleurs justement à s'adapter aux effets des crises climatiques, notamment sur les enjeux de stress thermique. Voilà, ils interviennent à 3 niveaux, sur le lieu de travail, au niveau sectoriel et au niveau national. Ils organisent des programmes de formation pour ces travailleurs et travailleuses sur les risques sanitaires liés au changement climatique et aussi les mesures de protection possibles. Ce syndicat, évidemment, entre aussi en dialogue social avec les employeurs afin d'obtenir des mesures pour un environnement de travail sûr et sain. Voilà. Austin, the floor is yours. I don't see you directly here. Yes, okay, I see you coming on.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Yes,
we can hear you well. Yeah.
Yes. I will take you through the practical actions that the trade union for the farm workers in Zimbabwe, GAPWUZ, has done over the past period in terms of the practical actions with regards to social protection, climate change, and just transition. GAPWUZ is a trade union for farm workers, which is a democratic trade union that is voluntarily formed to promote the agricultural workers' rights. GAPWUZ has its existence from around 1982, and its major mandate is to represent workers across the 7 agricultural sectors in Zimbabwe. And these sectors are largely horticulture sectors, the tea and coffee subsector, the agro-industry processing subsector, the timber subsector, the carpenter subsector, general agriculture, sugarcane and aquaculture subsectors. These are agricultural entities where agricultural production takes place, and it has a command of over 120,000. Next slide. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. In terms of putting the context regarding climate change, we have witnessed a profound and worsening impact of climate change in Zimbabwe, especially due to the country's reliance on rain-fed agriculture, due to limited infrastructure and high levels of poverty. Zimbabwe has been facing perennial and prolonged droughts between 2019 to 2023, where there's been severe food shortages as a result of drought, which affected over 7 million people in the country, and the majority of them being farm workers due to the nature of work that they do. There are also challenges with regards to cyclones and flooding, where events like the cyclone Idai of 2019 caused widespread destruction, killing hundreds of people and also causing lots of displacements of thousands of households, with a lot of damage to infrastructure, particularly in the Manikala and eastern regions of the country. And in that regard, GAPWUZ lost quite a number of members in Chimanimani and Chipinge districts. We also witnessed heat waves, which results in rising average temperatures, and also cold waves resulting in extremely low temperatures. This also affects water availability and also affect crop and livestock production, as there's a reduced underground water for quite a number of productivity elements within the agriculture industry. Next slide. Yes, I will talk about the actions that GAPWUZ is very much into in terms of pro-offer solutions that speaks to challenges brought in by climate change, and as we seek for a just transition as we are embedded with these problems. GAPWUZ advocates for the inclusion of agricultural workers within the national social security protection schemes to address their vulnerability. As a union, we have lobbied for the extension of government, especially during the Cyclone Idai, where thousands of the farm workers were left homeless. And during the drought spells, where food aid support was being given by government. So one of the actions is the advocacy and policy engagement. In terms of policy engagement, GAPWUZ uses collective bargaining and legal avenues, where we meet with the employers and government officials to register workers for the National Social Security Authority schemes, and quite a number of policy engagements that we do as well. Next. Yeah, we also promote renewable energy through provision of solar systems in the farm clinics, where we identify such infrastructure with no support of electricity. Hence, we advocate for installation of solar units to provide renewable energy. And as a result, GAPWUZ promotes solar energy as a sustainable solution that aligns with climate mitigation goals and improve livelihoods. So many farms in Zimbabwe do have farm clinics that lack electricity, and as a result, we then depend on renewable energy to then provide power sources and then enhance their ability to offer essential health services, especially during climate where there's also heavy rains disrupting electricity, load shedding, and also where we get deep down into the rural areas where electricity is not even provided. So these are some of the actions that we put in place to promote resilience as a result of the impact posed due to climate change. Next. Of renewable energy, it also improves healthcare access, where farm workers and their families would then receive more consistent medical services. This is also
Austin,
done to also enhance climate-related health risks, mitigation practices. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you're a bit cut off. May I ask you maybe to turn off the video?
The solar systems. Maybe put a disclaimer. I've tried to put the video on, it's on, but the camera does not support the
but
video.
you can just
I'm
turn
a bit
it off.
challenged
So maybe,
on that.
Yeah, turn it off. It's fine like this. Thanks. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So you can go to the next slide, please. Yes, we also engage through negotiations that negotiating for climate responsive labor protection systems is also one of the things that GAPWUZ works on. We negotiate for climate risk allowances so that farm workers can also benefit from the exposure to heat and also drought-related hardships. So we have a principle regulation called Statutory Instrument 41 of 2022 that includes these provisions so that farm workers will then benefit. And these allowances help to compensate farm workers for the increased hazardous working conditions that are brought in by the exposure to high temperatures and the poor water access and also excessive cold conditions. So through such engagements during the collective bargaining process, GAPWUZ pushes for the changes such as access to clean drinking water and also provision of shelter to provide rest areas for the farm workers during heat waves, and also adjusting working hours to avoid both the extreme heat conditions and also avoid extreme cold conditions. Next slide. Yes, in terms of legal support, we realize that due to the climate change-induced risks and disasters, there are also cases of unfair dismissal during the post-disaster period. So as a result, we have a legal desk that works towards representing these workers who might have been dismissed unfairly following cases of droughts or floods or any other climate-related condition, like especially when workers might be forced to work during rain periods. If they resent against such, some employers might tend to dismiss them unfairly. Hence, we have a legal representation to then challenge such dismissals and ensure that workers are compensated to work. Next. Yes, we also run campaigns in terms of awareness raising perspectives and enhancement of worker education. And over 500 targeted farm workers were trained on climate change and adaptation mechanisms, so that they also transfer knowledge to other workers within the farming community with regards to just transition, climate change, and also mitigation and adaptation mechanisms. So these are some of the things that GAPWUZ do in terms of climate change awareness perspectives. Farm workers are on the front lines of climate change, but often information and tools to respond to its impact is also missing in the matrix. So GAPWUZ also react by also empowering such workers with knowledge that is essential for their protection on health matters and livelihoods. It also helps to enhance adaptive farming practices like eco-friendly agro practices, and ensuring that they understand and they claim their rights under such impacts that might be provided by bad agriculture or bad climatic conditions. Hence, we also lobby for labor-related climate change oriented frameworks. Next. Next slide. The education and training initiatives provide the following: increase the workers' confidence in engaging employers about such climate change related risks. Some trained workers have also become peer educators so that they are better able to spread the information within the communities, and hence funding their community-based approaches in terms of raising awareness and also imparting knowledge about just transition with regards to climate change within the agriculture industry in Zimbabwe. Next slide. We also form and forge strategic partnership to amplify farm workers' voices. And we have worked with quite a number of regional, local, international civil society organizations to ensure that the realities and the rights of Zimbabwean farm workers are also represented in the national and the global discussions with regards to climate change, just transition, and occupational health and safety concerns. So this kind of leverage in terms of partnership helps also to put the voices of farm workers in the forefront with regards to the work that they do in terms of raising knowledge and awareness on climate change impacts, and also to work towards a just transition so that we better able to then adapt to the risks that are posed by the impact of climate change. Next slide. There are also collaborative efforts that are done through campaigns, especially on occupational heat stress, especially under extreme heat conditions. We have the Heat Kills campaign, which is a response to rising temperatures, or also lowering of temperatures. Hence, we have extensive or excessive cold conditions and also heat waves in the agriculture sector. Hence, the campaign helps then to sensitize both the employers and also the resting time, so that workers are not exposed to extreme heat waves. We also, through the National Employment Council, where we do collective bargaining, promote good agricultural practices, so that there are also elements of agroecological alternatives that the employers should then use to emphasize on environmentally sustainable practices, so that we also take care of the environment and also build resilience for smallholder farmers and protection to farm workers who also help in terms of productivity. There are also
Austin, I'm so sorry,
where,
but I will ask you to conclude so we can go to Q&A session. Thanks.
Yes, the next slide, please. The major challenges faced by farm workers include non-provision of climate-resilient protective clothing, increasing informality, and exclusion of farm workers in social protection mechanisms. There are also cases of resource constraints, resistance also from employers to partake good agricultural practices, and also gender and youth vulnerability within the agricultural industry. Next slide. We therefore recommend that there's also need to strengthen unions' capacities to better able to cope with the challenges that climate change pose as risks. We also call for empowerment of unions to advocate for regular and comprehensive climate-related health risk assessments by employers. Also, support in terms of income for farm workers post-disaster rehabilitation processes, and also to have gender-responsive climate adaptation and strategies that recognize and address the vulnerabilities that women workers also do face. So these are some of the calls and recommendations that we should be making as unions, so that we take the message regarding climate change issues and just transition forward and save the environment, save the workers through worker protection. And as a result, I think this is what we had also preferred to offer in terms of the presentation for this webinar on social protection. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you so much for showing us all your different practices, and also that you are really mentioning that it's a lot of different practices that together can also make a robust and adaptive social protection system. So that's wonderful, because it's something we've seen also in the different Q&A and different questions. And yeah, thanks again. And to that, I will give the floor to my colleague Koen, who tried to gather some questions from the different panelists. Very sorry for the timing, because we'll need to stop at 4 for the interpreter. So Koen.
Okay, very briefly, I tried to regroup some of the questions. So our friend Rokaya Bualam has asked several questions, and I will very briefly condense them into one question for Christina. The question is about the complexity of the just transition, because and a lot of measures are needed. A lot of things must be done. Now, how to guarantee workers' rights and social protection at all at once, actually? What would you suggest, but very briefly?
I'll try to be very, very brief. And indeed, I think this is kind of a very important point, and this is indeed the biggest challenge. And given that there are so many aspects to it, I think the policies and measures and actions will need to happen on all these fronts. And what I can, and also to keep it brief. I think several of you might already be familiar with the guidelines on the just transition that have been adopted by the ILO in a tripartite way back in 2015, but then again reaffirmed in 2023. And I think these guidelines really provide for a very comprehensive vision that also links the dot between these different measures, with regard to social protection, with regard to workers' rights, with regard to employment policies, with regard to more specific climate environmental policies. So I'll put the link in the chat for colleagues to look at. So trying to be brief on that. So thank you so much, Kun.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question, more specific, question for Jean Japhet. Je vais le poser en français parce qu'elle a été posée en français par Rémi. Comment fonctionne l'articulation entre les mutuelles et les coopératives? Est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer très brièvement la connexion entre les deux? Comment ça fonctionne? Pour Jean Japhet Nakintije.
Oui, merci. Donc, les mutuelles de santé sont connectées avec les coopératives. Ce sont d'abord les mutuelles de santé qui ont été mises en place en avant. Et les membres ont connu des difficultés financières pour payer les cotisations. C'est ainsi qu'on a pensé à la création des coopératives. Donc, les membres des coopératives sont les membres des mutuelles de santé. Ils ont la même cible, mais la coopérative occupe le volet économique et la mutuelle de santé occupe le volet social. Avec chaque entité a ses propres services. Et les membres des mutuelles de santé peuvent bénéficier des services des coopératives et vice-versa. Donc, ils partagent aussi les charges de fonctionnement. Par exemple, on peut trouver des mutuelles de santé avec les coopératives qui sont dans les mêmes locaux. Donc, ils partagent les bureaux, ils peuvent partager des charges de fonctionnement. Aussi, les coopératives fournissent des facilités aux membres pour payer les cotisations. Par exemple, le paiement, le recouvrement des cotisations des mutuelles de santé automatiquement en prélevant sur les stockages dans les coopératives. Et si les coopératives offrent des ristournes à leurs membres, les ristournes peuvent contribuer à payer les cotisations en mutuelle de santé. Donc, il y a une série de services que les membres des mutuelles de santé peuvent profiter de la part de la coopérative et vice-versa. Donc, chaque entité développe ses propres services et les membres en profitent. Merci.
Ok, un tout grand merci pour cette réponse très précise. Donc, c'est bien innovante, hein, l'approche pour vraiment faire cette connexion. Quelque chose qui peut certainement inspirer aussi ailleurs. Troisième, et c'est l'avant-dernière question qu'on va traiter ici dans la session de questions-réponses. C'est une question pour Johan. Que penses-tu, Johan, des effets de la pression démographique, donc une forte densité de la population, notamment, par exemple, en pensant du Burundi, parce que tu as parlé dans ta présentation du Burundi. Donc, pression démographique. Quelle réponse?
Que c'est une préoccupation très grande, pas seulement de ma part, mais je pense de toute organisation qui travaille au Burundi. Et Christina a parlé de la complexité de Just Transition et protection sociale. Et je pense que la pression démographique fait partie de cette complexité. Et honnêtement dire que je n'ai pas tout de suite une réponse parce que la démographie a un effet énorme sur les effets du changement climatique, hein, vu la pression, par exemple, sur la Terre pour une population qui est en majorité encore composée d'agriculteurs, et d'autre part pour trouver des systèmes de protection sociale, que ce soit l'accès à des services de base, mais aussi à des systèmes d'assurance. Et donc, je pense que la seule chose qui pourrait aider, c'est que la société civile burundaise, ensemble avec les autorités, fasse une vision conjointe, comment intégrer la problématique de la démographie dans les mesures de protection sociale et la lutte contre les effets du changement climatique. Et en fait, j'avais vu la question dans le chat ou dans les questions-réponses et je pensais que Jean Japhet serait peut-être aussi la bonne personne pour répondre parce que lui, il est vraiment sur le terrain au Burundi et qui doit, avec les mutuelles de santé, être tout de suite confronté à cette question aussi. Et ça prolonge le temps de réponse.
Oui, ça c'est vrai. Mais donc, je donne la parole très très brièvement à Jean Japhet. Peut-être tu peux ajouter un élément sur la densité de population, densité démographique et les défis, je dirais, additionnels que ça pose.
Effectivement, la pression démographique cause d'importants dégâts en rapport avec la destruction de l'environnement. Par exemple, il y a des espaces qui étaient végétalisés, mais maintenant qui sont détruits pour faire face euh, donc pour l'exploitation agricole. Mais aussi, il y a développement des activités qui ne respectent pas l'environnement, comme l'extraction des matériaux de construction dans les rivières, l'extraction minière. Tout ça, ce sont des services ou bien des activités qui sont développées parce que la population burundaise devient de plus en plus nombreuse, de telle sorte qu'il faut développer des activités et ces activités peuvent causer des effets sur la destruction de l'environnement et le changement climatique.
Okay, un tout grand merci. And then one final question I have for Rajendra. It's a very specific one because in your presentation you already mentioned about local disaster committees or services that have to be put in place. The question is, how do you reconstruct, or how, when it comes to reconstruction property, which is destroyed by natural weather events, do you require satellite images or urban and rural real estate registers, cadastral information? Must it be stored prior? Maybe explain how the local entities you talked about would be involved. How would they act upon the fact that houses and property of people are destroyed because of a natural event?
So thank you, Scone, for these very summarizing questions, as I was unable to understand the specific questions that just the participants asked to me. So you supported me to translate this and give the opportunity to respond. As I mentioned, the Constitution of Nepal has provisioned 3 types of government, where the specific tax has divided for federal government, provincial government, and local government. So the local governments are more responsible to raise, to respond, and to interact with the communities people or the local communities. In this case, come to the questions where any destruction or any distress occur due to the different disaster is still not provisions to have satellite or any things to capture or observe the situations. However, the authority has been given to local governments, ward level governments, to have a detailed need assessment. So the standard has provision in to respond any disaster or any risks in three ways. Is the local government, in terms of this anticipatory action, they can provide assistance to those affected and vulnerable populations before the disaster. That is one provision that is mentioned, and which is amount of 15 to 20,000. So the government can provide the direct assistance or any kind support in equal to 15,000 20,000 before the disaster if any places are defined as the prone or any very high risk areas of any upcoming disaster. And another provision is there during disaster is the government has, the standard has provision, the police has provision that the team, the local government can mobilize either the security personnel or local civil society organizations, development partner, and others to respond immediately after the disaster to rescue and different operations procedure. And after disaster, there is the provision of reconstruction and housing. So after certain days of the disaster, the government has declared to provide 50,000 as temporary shelter to build temporary shelter to the affected households. And later on, for the reconstruction of different houses and other properties, the government has declared to provide the cash assistance. As I mentioned, Nepal is geographically divided into three regions, where mountains, hill, and Tarai, where Tarai is a bit very access to transportation and other facilities, and in these mountains and hills, it is a bit difficult due to geographical difficulties. So government has provisions to provide 5 lakh for hills populations. Those populations or household destroyed in the hills due to disaster, they will get 5 lakhs. Sorry, I lost for a few seconds.
Yes,
so
few seconds, yes.
Continuing.
And you conclude?
So,
yeah.
I'm just, I need just 30 seconds to conclude. And
Okay.
5 lakhs is provision for mountains households, and 4 lakhs for these hills populations or his households, and 3 lakhs for the Thorai or in the flat regions households. So these provisions are mentioned in this standard and also Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, which clearly define how these assistance can be provided by the government. And also it has the system of one door, where any or development partner or any civil society organizations, if they want to respond, they need to coordinate with local this disaster management committee, and after getting approval from the local disaster management committee, they can work and themselves in the community level. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for this clear answer. And back to Aurélie, I would say.
Merci beaucoup. Voilà, je sais pas, oui, ok, super. Ben, merci beaucoup. Il y a effectivement encore d'autres questions dans le chat et aussi dans la boîte Q&A. Donc, je pense que on a ouvert la discussion et qu'elle est encore très large, elle est très complexe. Et donc, j'espère qu'on aura encore l'occasion dans d'autres instances de pouvoir en discuter. Déjà, on peut justement vous faire la promotion en fait de nos prochains webinaires qui seront plutôt axés sur l'économie sociale et solidaire. Mais on a vu aussi que la protection sociale englobe aussi ces aspects-là. Et puis une question vraiment avec un focus sur le genre aussi pour 2026. Donc voilà, stay tuned. N'hésitez pas aussi à nous dire voilà, si vous avez différents éléments que vous voulez encore partager avec nous. Et peut-être juste pour conclure, merci déjà à tous les panélistes, tous les intervenants, toutes les personnes qui ont posé des questions, évidemment tout le groupe de travail de préparation de ce webinaire. Merci vraiment de votre implication. Merci aussi aussi aux interprètes qui sont restés un petit peu plus tard. Et peut-être pour conclure, ces mots aussi que de l'importance voilà, de la justice climatique, mais de la justice sociale surtout avant tout. Et voilà, on a parlé aussi des questions de financement de cette transition juste pour que l'ensemble de la population puisse jouir de leurs droits sociaux. Voilà, je pense qu'on pourra clôturer là-dessus pour essayer vraiment d'assurer des systèmes de protection sociale voilà, résistants pour tous et tous, et surtout pour la protection de notre écosystème. Merci encore et on vous donne rendez-vous alors en 2026. Stay tuned, comme on dit en anglais. Restez à l'écoute. Voilà, merci beaucoup. Encore merci à tout le monde d'avoir été connecté ici avec nous et on espère pouvoir rester en contact. On vous enverra aussi, autant que faire se peut, les différents matériels qui ont été présentés aujourd'hui. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Thank you to all. Muchas gracias. Thanks.